Hey, June.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, now everybody's coming. Hey, Corey. Hey, Clarence. What are y'all working on now, June? What season's next for the yard?
We'll put up a little bit of patriotic stuff probably in another couple of weeks in May. But we don't have as much stuff to put up. All of our stuff is kind of got worn out, and wood's too expensive now.
Oh, my goodness. Hey, Corey, can you hear us now? Is this a better connection? Let's see. Clarence, are you on yet?
Hi, Diane.
Hey, Corey, how are you?
Fine, thanks. I was expecting Votebuilder.
It is
Am I on the-
Votebuilder. I'm just facilitating, so I'm going to butt out just as soon as I
Okay.
turn over the hosting duties. So Linda and I both have the full service Zoom. I got it because I thought I might need it to teach again, but it's worked out that I didn't. But I have it for the Democratic women, and Linda has it for the party. So basically, whichever one of us is available can do it for other folks. So now Nicole's here, and she's going to be running this show. So I'm going to go ahead and make her a co-host, and I will shut.
Well, not that I'm not happy to see you,
I know.
but I thought, oh God, have I gone to the wrong meeting?
Yes, it's Thursday, May 13th, and we're having our Democratic women meeting.
Yes, I've got that on my calendar. Thank you. So are
Nicole?
you still out in that beautiful part of the world?
No, I've been confined to a recliner now since last Friday. I had my bunion repaired, so I'm not seeing
Oh,
anything beautiful except my television.
oh, honey, that's so difficult. Oh, are you doing okay?
I am doing fine, and I keep saying to my husband, it's not like I brought this on myself. Oh wait, I did, so it'll be okay.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm going to go ahead and make you a co-host.
No worries. I have a copy of the PDF and also of I have Votebuilder up, so just in case it's needed.
And then as soon as Ginny gets on, we'll make her a co-host too. And Jenny's here. Yay. And James Smith is here as well. So the recording started at 6:25. So we'll have a recording and it either goes to the cloud or my computer, but I'll send it to both of you as soon as it comes out. And I'm going to butt out now and stop my video. And Nicole and Jenny, you guys have.
Mhm.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself. Hi, Jenny. I'm not going video. This is James Smith.
Yep.
I'm not
Got
going video because I've been installing carpet in my home all day
Mm.
and I'm eating a half a pizza. So
That sounds like a good reward.
As you can see, I also have a virtual background. I do not live in a bakery, even though sometimes I do like to bake bread.
Oh, it looks delicious.
So Nicole, I continue to have serious problems, but I think it'll be okay. My new computer arrived and I worked yesterday and I worked really hard to get it up to date, and then found out today, just before this meeting, the camera wasn't working.
Yeah, well, I have the PDF up and on standby, and I have Votebuilder up on standby as well.
Okay, I think I got it. I think my secondary machine is working for the moment, but at any moment it could decide not to.
That's okay. I've got all the backup.
Good, great, thank you. So while we're waiting, Corey, I volunteer at the Bank of the Arts, and I was putting in inventory of your jewelry. I was very impressed. Does everyone
Oh,
know
thank
that
you.
yes, jewelry?
Pardon?
I was wondering if everyone else knew that you made this lovely jewelry.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't market it per se. I've had it in a couple of galleries, and I'm glad to have it at Bank of the Arts. I think that will be nice. But thank you.
It's like I walked in, it was like, oh, I know Corey.
Well, of course. And thank you for doing this session.
I hope it's useful.
I'm sure it will be. Even though I feel like I made a lot of progress in it, I'm hoping that a couple of things that I got tangled up with, you can help.
Yeah, there's so much, I'm constantly learning new things, so I don't think it hurts to have it over more than once.
That's what I decided. Especially since, you know, by the time we need it again, it's going to be a little stale.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Brenda.
Hello, everyone. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
This is Clarence Huggins from Fort Monwell, Coal City.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
So should we get going or should we wait a bit? That was really for you, Nicole.
No, I'm looking to see if we have, I think we have most of the people we wanted here. There might be a few other, there's, I think, a few names that were interested that are missing.
There's somebody who's showing up as Neil Hudson. Who are you?
Nell Hudson? Yeah.
Neil.
Hi,
Okay. What precinct are you with?
I'm with Trent Woods, which I see we are well represented, but I would just like to learn how to do this. You hear it talked about, so.
I now remember you were on the list, but didn't update my list to include you. That's why I was very confused. All right.
Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
going to go ahead and share my screen because, as you may have heard me talking to Nicole, I've been having so many computer problems in the last couple of weeks that I'm not sure anything's going to work at any given moment. So let's just make sure that's going to start while we're waiting. Oh, there we go. There's Mary. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started because the intro, if somebody comes in a little bit late, they're not going to miss that much. This is an introduction to Votebuilder. It is geared towards those of you who have never used Votebuilder before, or those of you who have used it, but like Corey said, she wants a little bit of a refresher. We will have a question session after this is all over, but if you have a question that you would like to address right away, or you don't want to forget that you have the question, you can put that in the chat and Nicole will either answer it or bring it up to me when it's appropriate.
Yep.
So the first question about Votebuilder is why? Why do you want to use Votebuilder? And it really has a simple answer, and that is it makes your work so much more efficient. Having data lets you target people more efficiently. We all know in our precincts, not only do we have limited dollar resources, but we have limited people resources. There's only so many of us who are willing to go out and make phone calls or knock on doors. And so we want to make sure that we're reaching out to the most important, persuadable people, because otherwise we can spend a lot of our resources and not really make much happen. The other thing that makes your Votebuilder work so efficient is that the data is shared. So if you put in something for your precinct, say somebody new comes to your precinct and they have a new phone number, if you enter that data in Votebuilder, then I, as someone who works for the county and might be doing some work, or somebody on a campaign, will all have that data. So we're not constantly duplicating work about things that we're updating or information that we've gotten from voters we can share with others. And I'm just going to very quickly pop out of here because I thought I was going to be at the other computer, and that's where my water is. Okay, now I'm back. So the first question a lot of people ask about Votebuilder is, how often is the data updated? Now, if you do something like I just described, if someone new came to your precinct and you found out they have a new phone number, or maybe they're not using their landline anymore, they've gone all 100% to a cell phone, you can manually update that information. And later on, I'll tell you how to do that as a precinct person. That manual update is immediately available to everyone who has access to Votebuilder. But Votebuilder also uses a lot of data feeds. In particular, it gets a lot of information from the Board of Elections, who has registered to vote, who's changed the registration during election periods, who has already voted. There's also a lot of marketing data that feeds some of the other information that we're going to be using. And that information, if you're in a non-election period, and now is a non-election period, so you should think of a non-election period as there's no election on the horizon, you know, that we aren't thinking about working on an election, that's a non-election period. You're only going to get the data updated once every 2 months. But again, if we're not working heavily, that's not a big deal. If it's an election period, and you can roughly think of that as Sometimes shortly before the primary, a little bit before early voting, really all the way through the general election is an election period. Once we're actively working on an election, and really once you start on the primary, there are things you can be doing throughout the year until the general election. That period, your data is going to be updated every 2 weeks. Finally, when you're in early voting, either in the primary or in general election, voting data is updated every single morning. So you can do this. I recommend you do it. I've done it for myself just to make sure it's working. If it's an early voting period and you voted the day before, go in and double check. Does it show that you've actually voted? It should. And if it doesn't, you should let us know. And finally, after the general election, there does take some time period for them to finalize everything. So you actually don't get the general election results for 2 months later. But my feeling on that is we're all exhausted at that point and we really don't care. We're happy to have those 2 months. So let's see. All right, so how do you log in? First of all, Nicole has to give you access, and I believe she's given access to everyone who on this session. And so the first thing to get to Votebuilder, you just want to Google or do whatever search you have, Votebuilder. Now, when you do that, you'll find, you may find Votebuilder login. I don't recommend using that. I've tried it in the past. I haven't tried it in a long time, so maybe it's better, but for some reason it never acted right. So I just recommend going to the choosing votebuilder.com. And when you click on that, what you will see is this screen on the right hand side. And that is your Action ID login. Now, if any of you have ever done any virtual phone banking, or if you've done either lit drops or door knocking using Minivan, you should already have an Action ID and it is still effective. So what you would put in is your email. If you remember it, you get a gold star on the top of your head and you would enter that. But if you don't remember it, then you just click on you forgot your password and you can recover it. If you've never done any of those things, then you have to create an account, which is very simple. You have to, so you would click on this area down here, create an account, an Action ID account, and you will have to enter your cell phone number, your email address, and you will have to create a password. Remember this password because it will be good for years. So even, if you worked on the campaign last November and we're not going to have one this year and we're not going to do it until next March, that password will still be valid. So put it somewhere safe, somewhere where you can find it again, or you can recover it. Even now, for those of you who have used Votebuilder before, there's actually been a change. Many of you, those of you who use it know at this point, I would normally describe about how you translate your PIN into letters. You no longer have to do that. When you log into Action ID, you go straight into Votebuilder. However, there have been a few things I think that they've refreshed that will be a little bit different the first time you go into Votebuilder, even if you've been using Votebuilder for a while. And one of those things is you will now be given a recovery password, and you should make a copy of that. Copy on your computer because it's pretty long and you probably don't want to retype it. If you want to print it somewhere, that's fine too. But again, save it somewhere where it's safe, because I think I haven't needed to do it, but I'm thinking you will need that recovery password to be able to recover your Action ID, or probably if you can't find it, my guess is you're going to have to go to Nicole and have her reset things. So once you do that, you get to your primary Votebuilder screen. This is what will look like once you log into Action ID. I don't know if I'm kind of covering up some things on my screen, but can you see over here where I'm pointing, or are you just seeing pictures of people? Okay. There on the upper right hand side, you will see your name. Right now you're looking at my name, but that will tell you, yes, you're who you are, and a little down button. And the down button is, you can update information about yourself. You can update your profile if something changes that you need to have updated. And there is also a help function there that is of moderate help. I find that many times I search and I can't find what I want. But given we're in a time period where we're not really busy, you could still play around with that if you've got some question. That said, you can always send an email to either me or Nicole. And Nicole, will you put our email address in the chat? I knew she would. So if you're trying to do something and you just can't figure out, just feel free to send us an email. This is what we're here for. We're here to help you and make you a better Votebuilder user. So don't feel guilty if you're asking us some questions. So the next thing that you want to be aware of on this main screen is up here on the left-hand side that I have circled. You're going to see my voters and my campaign. Go back up. Yes. Again, for those of you who have used Votebuilders in the past, usually it comes up under my voters, but again, I think that's one of the refresh things that they recently did. And you could end up, just defaulting into my campaign. At least that's what happened with me. And I was doing a search and it was like, these results can't be right. And then I realized I was in the wrong area. So those of you who have used this before, just make sure you are in my voters. For everyone else, my campaign is really more about volunteering. You can add people, volunteers to that section. You can have people who aren't voters in that section. If you have someone in your precinct who has a teenager who's super excited about trying to work on the campaign, but they're not 18, you can actually add them and keep them as part of that section. That said, I hardly ever use this. We have an email account for my precinct, and most of the campaigning I do within there. So I don't actually find that very useful. I think that's really more when you're really working on somebody who's actually running for election. That might be more useful, or maybe even at the county level, but at the precinct level, probably won't use it too, but you should know it's there and why it's different. Where you're going to be spending 99% of your time, and so you want to make sure that's what's clicked on, is my voters. My voters is populated by the Board of Elections data. It has all the voters in your precinct, and you cannot edit it. Sometimes you will know someone has moved out of your precinct. You cannot delete them. The data is the official Board of Elections voting data, and only when somebody changes their voter registration will they disappear. So you can do things about removing their address so you know that they're not active, but you cannot actually remove anyone from my voters. But that's where you mostly want to be. These are the people you're going to be trying to reach out to get them to vote the way we want them to vote. The other thing you're seeing on this screen is this long list of actions. This is called the quick navigation bar. And this allows you to jump around from spot to spot rather than doing something and having to go all the way back to the main screen and then click on something else. Wherever you are in Votebuilder, or virtually wherever you are in Votebuilder, you can go and find wherever you want to go to and click on that and go directly. So it just saves you a little bit of a step. You can see that there are a lot of things in that list, and we're only going to go over 2 of them, and we're still going to go over a lot of stuff today. So today, we're only going to look at two things. We're going to talk about how to create a list and how to do a quick lookup. And we're going to start off with how to do a quick lookup. So you've logged into Votebuilder, you come up with this screen, and then what you're going to do is, I want to do quick lookup. So you just bring your cursor over here and click on it, and it will take you to this page. And what this page does is it allows you to look up an individual person or edit an individual person's data. There are more efficient ways to look up or update data for a group of people, but when you're just trying to do one person, this is what you want to do. You're going to put in the person's name. I put my name in here, and the county. Now, you can put in a lot more information, but I find even if I'm putting it in for myself, like I am here, I know the answer to all these questions, but if I don't put it in exactly the way it's been recorded in the Votebuilder data, I don't come up. So I have found that when I'm using quick lookup, I try to put as little data in as possible. I put in my name and the county. If it's a common name like Joe Smith, my name is not common, so I'm the only person who comes up. But if it's a more common name, you might have to add a little bit of information. But again, you should try to less is more in this situation. So once you enter that data, you just come down here and click on the search. And what will come up below the line is a list of people. In my case, I'm the only Virginia matter in the county, so that was easy to find. I will click on that person. If there were 3 Virginia matters, then I would look and hopefully I could tell this is the person in my precinct, and I would click on that particular one. When you click on that name, you're going to get a whole list of information about that person. This is where you can update individual information. And again, this is going to be more like if you've had a personal contact, if you have a new person coming to your precinct meeting that you just find out there's something that's changed about them. You can delete, edit, or add addresses, phone numbers, and emails. So if you have updated information, not only can you update it, but please do. Especially phone numbers. The phone numbers that originally go into Votebuilder are the ones that someone supplied when they registered to vote. And so many people have converted from the landlines they were using when they registered to cell phones. We need to get cleaned up better data. So if you get a new phone number, please, please, please do update that information. You'll also see contact history. You can add a new contact. Again, suppose you're, well, I know this happened in the last election. We had some people who would drive around their neighborhoods and they would see that there were certain people with Trump signs. Well, we know that those people were not going to vote for Joe Biden, and we don't need to waste our time trying to convince somebody who is so much a Trump supporter that they're putting a sign in their yard. So you can go in there and say, okay, I've had a personal contact with this person. They're not supporting our candidate. And we won't waste our time then trying to contact that person again. You can also look at if someone else has done some canvassing. So again, like if a candidate has done some door knocking, you can see how they contacted the person and what the results were. And again, that can keep you from duplicating some of the work that someone else did. On the right-hand side of the screen, you will see something called vital stats. And that gives your voters attributes in a nutshell. And I recommend, again, you're not going to hurt Votebuilder by playing around with it. So go in and put yourself in and look at your vital stats. See what information comes up, make sure it's correct. And if it's not corrected, and you just get a sense of what's available. One of the things that we found that's a little unusual is in the suppressions area. And suppressions are things that Votebuilder by default doesn't include in a search you do. They don't, for instance, include people who are considered or thought to be deceased. So first of all, it's good to know what those defaults are. But secondly, from time to time, it's just wrong. It's Votebuilder says somebody's deceased, and you know for a fact that they're your next door neighbor and they are, alive and well. You might ask, well, how does this happen? If you've done any phone banking, especially on your phone, there's a whole series of buttons you have to push. I didn't reach this person, they're not home, they moved. It's not that hard to misclick, it's like, shoot, I meant to click not at home or moved, and then I clicked deceased. So things like that happen. You can, if you know for certain that they are not deceased, just go in and unclick that, and they'll then show up in searches again. And finally, do not forget save all. It's on the right-hand side. If you've gone through all this work and then you don't save all, you haven't done anything. I think I wasted your time a little bit. All right, the second thing we're going to talk about today is creating a list. And this is like the bulk, it's the real meat of what you're going to be doing in Votebuilder. Virtually everything you do, there's a few things like the quick lookup that you won't create a list, but almost anything you do in Votebuilder, you're going to first start with creating a list. And that simply means, what voters are you trying to reach? How can I find this particular group of voters I'm trying to reach? The first thing you'll notice is when you click on the create a list, you'll see a screen that has like a lot of different attributes. First thing to notice is they are in alphabetical order, which may seem obvious, but I'm embarrassed to tell you how long it took me before I realized they were in alphabetical order. I was constantly scrolling up and down this long list before I realized, oh, alphabetical order. So good thing to know. The second thing is every main attribute has a star next to it like this. You will be using home districts every single time you create a list. So what you can do is go find your home districts, click on the star, and that will make it go to the top of your list. So you don't have to constantly be scrolling down, because every single time you will be using it. You could also, usually, but not always, looking at parties. So you might also want to put a star next to that. So that's near the top. And sometimes, like if you're doing a racial profile of your precinct, you might be looking at that a lot, and you could click on that star and it will go to the top because you're using it a lot. And then when you're not using it so much, you just can click on it again and it will go back in the regular alphabetical order. All right, so as I said, home districts, you must enter information in here in order to get any results. For the first timers, and that may include those people who have used Votebuilder but haven't used it in a while, because I think, again, this is part of the refresh, you may have to enter state North Carolina. After you do that once, you won't have to continue to do it, but that seems to be a new thing recently. Then you're going to have to enter county. You must enter county. So you're going to have to put in Craven County. All of us are limited to access to Craven County. And only after you enter county can you actually then have the option of picking out your precinct. So those are the two things you must do every time: pick out your county, and presumably if you're working as a precinct person, you're going to put in a precinct. Okay.
And just a quick mention on precincts. Some people are only limited to access their own precinct. During election years, I do expand this access, especially if someone's working with a sister precinct that needs a little more help, or if they're working with campaigns. And campaigns, if you work on a campaign, your access might be granted to a completely other county or a completely other district or the whole district. But right now, many people are just limited to their precincts. But if you guys need more access, just let me know.
Okay, underneath that or starting in the first alphabetical criteria that you can pick is our addresses. And there are a bunch of attributes, and I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to go through the ones that I think you're most likely to use and explain a little bit why you might want to use those, okay? So addresses are very useful. You know, we didn't door knock in the last campaign, but hopefully by the time we have another election, we may be able to door knock again. So if you are going to do door knocking, first of all, so you go to addresses, and if you click on it, you get a menu that comes up to it. So this is what comes up underneath addresses. So if you want to do walkable houses, why would you choose walkable houses? If you're doing door knocking, there are sometimes houses that for whatever reasons are just difficult to get to. I've had houses that I couldn't figure out where they were at. I had, you know, the previous address and the next address, and it's like, I never figured out where this address was. So you just want to choose walkable houses so you're not wasting time looking for a house that you can't get to or trying to get to a house that's difficult to get to. Some of our precincts, not all of them, but some of them have multi-unit buildings, apartments. Often you either can't get into an apartment or they don't allow canvassing. So again, if you're going to be walking and you're distributing walking lists to various people in your precinct, you don't want to give one person a whole bunch of addresses that's an apartment building that they can't get into. So you want to be able to distribute in an effective way. How would you exclude apartments? So you want to go to this area that says building with approximately blank to blank units. If you want to exclude an apartment, you can put 1 or a blank, leave this blank to 2, and you must put a 2 in the 2 units. And what that will give you are single family houses and duplexes. So your walking list will only include those. On the other hand, so now you've excluded all those people in apartment complexes, but you still want to reach out to them. So let's say, well, since you can't door knock, you've decided to do a mailing just for apartments. So in that case, you would put a 3 in the left-hand side, and you would leave the right-hand side blank. And so any apartment building that had 3 or more units would be included in your mailing list. And that way you could limit your mailing just to apartments. Okay, agent registration. This is very, very useful. It can help you identify younger voters, which we identify as 18 to 36 years old. The reason why you might want to identify younger voters is they often don't react to party as much as older voters. So younger voters are very interested in issues. They might be really excited about a particular candidate, but you know, if we just say go vote Democrat, well, that's not going to resonate with them. So you want to know who your population is so you can make your message something that they will hear. The other thing that's very useful, and I recommend that every single precinct does this before every primary and every general election, is find out who the newly registered Democrats are in their precinct and write a letter to them. Your letter should say, you know, here's our precinct officers. This is when our precinct meetings are, or how you would get on a Zoom meeting. It would explain how to get on your precinct's email list. And of course, it would give them information. Where is your voting location? What are the early voting hours? Who a candidates list? This is very important in introducing yourselves to any new Democrats. And all you have to do is, so you would put in a registration date from either the last election or the last time you did this, if you've done it before, to the current date. And you do want to click on this little current that will be on the same line, because you want the current registration. You don't want an older registration. So you're looking for current registrations that are new from this date to this date. All right. During early voting, the default in Vote Builder is to exclude early voters. And again, that's very helpful because again, you don't want to waste time on contacting people who have already voted. You're not going to impact them. So you use your resources for people you can affect. You just need to be aware of this because sometimes you actually want to see the list of people who early voted. So you just need to be aware of whether you're excluding them or not. There is an option to find emails. You do need to, if you're doing this, make sure you check the subscription status that they are email addresses that the person is allowing us to use. I have done this. It wasn't particularly effective. Most of the addresses that were on there I already knew, or and a good number that I didn't know were no longer valid. But given that we're not really busy right now, like being in the middle of an election, this might be something you want to play around with just to see if you can add a few people to your email list. Party. Again, you really can't reach out to Republicans because, and you don't want to. You may say that, well, Republicans, we might be able to influence them, but there's something called blowback. And it actually is, if you reach out to certain people, you will actually cause them to vote more the other way than you want. So within Vote Builder, we're really only allowed to reach out to Democrats, unaffiliated, and a third party, which is in this county mostly libertarian. A lot of precincts, a lot of people who are new to this say, oh, but look at all the unaffiliated people. That's what I did the first time I got on Vote Builder. Wow, look at that potential. Well, the reality is just because someone is unaffiliated does not mean they don't strongly lean either strongly Republican or strongly Democrat. So do not assume that just because you have a lot of unaffiliated voters in your precinct that you actually can persuade these people. There is a better way to find persuadable people that we will go over shortly. So just don't fall into that trap of, I'm going to contact all the unaffiliated. All right, phone. If you want to do texting, make sure that you are choosing a verified or likely cell number, or you're going to be typing in a lot of numbers that aren't going to go anywhere. Also, if you're going to do phone calling, you want to choose a phone quality score of high or medium. Again, we do in this county, and I think even really in Eastern North Carolina, our phone data hasn't been updated as much as other parts in the state. This is what the Biden campaign was telling me, that when they were making phone calls, they found out that our phone number had not been updated as much. So that's the importance of using Vote Builder and updating that information. But what you want to do is use a phone quality score of high or medium, which means that somewhat recently that phone number has been verified to actually be the person. It's the working number and it's the person. So again, this is all about efficiency. If you're making a lot of phone calls, it gets very discouraging if phone call after phone call you make is to a number that's no longer in use. Race. There's both a race and ethnicity options in Vote Builder, but the ethnicity is so fine-tuned that we in this precinct or this county don't need to worry that level of detail. Race, I think, is perfectly fine. There's a lot of reasons why you might want to look at the race of your racial breakout of your precinct. One of them would be that you could see if your precinct has a large Hispanic population. You might want to see if you can get some of the voting materials translated into Spanish. Other racial profiles might be attuned to different messages than others. So it's good to understand who is in your precinct. Now we're at the point where you can really find the persuadable voters. There's something called scoring. And I'll be honest, if you go into scoring today, this is not what it's going to look like. It's constantly changing. So I saw no point in updating it, to be honest. For those of you who did use scoring previously, they actually have added a bunch of scores on issues. So we can find people, if there's a particular issue that a candidate is strong on, we can find the people who would be more persuadable based on that issue. So all I can say is the list is going to change. So, you know, it's even within an election timeframe, it's going to be changing. So you just have to go in there and see if anything looks useful. But there's a couple of things that will always be useful. You're going to have some form, it may not say exactly this, but you're going to see some sort of Democratic Party support, and you're going to get some sort of national turnout. These numbers will range from 0 to 100. The closer you are to 100, if it's Democratic Party support, the closer you are to 100, the more likely you are to vote Democratic. Turnout is the closer you are to 100, the more likely you are to turn out. So this is useful in a couple ways. Me, Ginny Mattern, I'm going to have a very high Democratic Party support and national turnout. You don't really need to be reaching out to me because I'm pretty much going to vote, and I'm going to vote the way you want me to vote. So again, use your limited resources to reach out to those people who could maybe need a little persuasion, a little push to vote. So what you really want to do is find people who have a Democratic support in about the 40 to 70% range. Those people vote Democratic sometimes, but not always. Same thing with national turnout. They vote some of the time, but not always. These are the people, if you actually spend your resources on, you might actually push them to go out and vote, and hopefully to vote for Democrats. This is a much better way to identify persuadable voters than just to assume that all unaffiliated people are persuadable, because that is certainly not true. Sadly, it's very not true in my precincts. The other thing I want to point out to you is normally this year we would be having municipal elections, but because of the delay in the census, because of COVID, I believe those municipal elections won't happen until next year. Municipal elections have a very low turnout. So you, again, you know, spend your resources wisely. This is a case where you might want to go, there is a special municipal turnout. And again, you want to look at those people, not like me, who I always vote no matter what the election is, but you want to look at the people who turn out some of the times, but not always for municipal elections. There are going to be so many people, no matter what you do, they're not going to come out and vote. So really use this to define when the municipal elections come up, those people that you might actually be able to push to vote. And yes, there's still more criteria. Sex. The gender can have an influence again if a particular if you have a female candidate, some women voters might be more inclined to vote for them. So you might want to do a special outreach to women voters, or there could be an issue that might be more interested into male voters. So it just depends on what the particulars of that particular election are. Survey question responses. As I said before, you, the precinct, the county, the candidates, all the information we get is in Votebuilder and is usable by everybody else. So say the candidate is out doing door knocking and they're asking questions and they're entering their responses into Votebuilder. You as a precinct can go in and look, and if you go into this, there'll just be a whole bunch of survey questions that you can click on and see what happened. Two that might be most interest to you is if we're in an election period, if we're getting close to the general election, you can see if anybody said they need a ride to the polls. If they do, you can reach out to those people in your precinct and either give them a ride to the polls, or usually there's something in the county going on that is more a centralized ride to the polls. You can give them the phone number they can call, but this way you can make sure that those people who want to vote but have a hard time getting there can get there. Another way of finding persuadable voters, although sometimes these are people who just don't want to admit they're not going to vote, so you just have to realize, is if someone has said they're unsure if they're going to vote or if they are unsure who they will vote for in one of the surveys. Then you might want to spend some time calling them, and it becomes a more personal phone call. It's not just a general phone call. You want to find out what they're interested in. You want to explain. A lot of people don't vote because they don't think it matters. So you need to have more of a personal conversation about why you think voting matters and why it's important for them to vote. So that's a more intense reach out, but it might be worthwhile. So let me step back a moment and say, every campaign has basically 3 major sections to it. The first actions early on are reaching out to dedicated Democrats to find if anybody wants to vote. Maybe you've got people who, are high turnout, high Democratic support, but they've never taken that extra step. You want to reach out to those in the early part of the election to find out if you can actually get them to do some volunteering. The second phase is persuasion. That's when you want to go out and find your persuadable voters. You want to reach out to a larger group of people, and you really are having conversations trying to explain why voting is important. What is it about the candidate you're supporting that might resonate with them? And finally, the last phase, and that's really the early voting, and very definitely the last few days before the general election or the primary, is get out the vote. And that's a phase where you are not worried about persuasion anymore. You're trying to contact people who said they were going to vote for your candidate. And it's all about push, 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 get to the polls. Do you know how to get to the polls? Do you know where the poll is? Do you know where the hours are? And that's what targeting is useful for, to get out the vote phase. Is you want to find people with high to good support, people who are probably going to vote for your candidate, and now you just need to push them to get to the polls. So again, it's not about wasting time on people who aren't voting for your candidate. You're just going to get those people to the polls. And finally, the last thing is voting history. Now, when you click on voting history, you're going to get a very long list of possible times people could have voted, years and years worth of primaries, general elections, municipal elections, midterms, presidential elections. There's a long list. Because there's such a long list, you have to choose all, any, or exactly. So suppose you want to find people like me who vote all the time. You might pick the last 4 elections and say, I want to see people who voted all 4 times. These are people that, maybe those are people who would volunteer because they are very, reliable Democratic voters. Sometimes you want to find, for instance, if you wanted to find infrequent Democratic voters, and while those people need more persuasion, they can be persuaded to vote if you explain why it's important. So you might find your infrequent voters by saying, I want them to have voted exactly once in the last 4 elections. So that's where the all, any, or exactly come in. The other thing you might do with voting history, and again, I've bolded Democratic because, again, we can't assume unaffiliated are which way they're leaning. So these are cases where you might want to focus only on Democrats, is look at the people who voted in the 2020 general election, but had to use a provisional ballot. That's something you can do now, again, when we're not in a real busy period. Reach out to them, ask them if they've resolved their issue, tell them how to get in contact with the Board of Elections, if they need an intermediary to figure out what's wrong. That's something you can do, and maybe get them a little bit hooked into your precinct by being helpful to them. So that's that's only a subset of the criteria you can use, but those are most of the ones that you'll probably use. So finally, once you've picked out, so what you're doing is you're sort of picking and choosing. For instance, if you wanted, let's see here. So if you wanted to do the last thing I said, let's go back. Oops. Yeah, let's talk about how would you do this last thing I just said. As I said, you have to start with putting in Craven County. So you have to start with County Craven. Then you're going to put in your precinct. And because we only want to reach out to Democrats, you're going to have to select party Democrats. And then finally, you're going to go to the voting history, click on that and say exactly one, and then click on provisional ballot in 2020 election. So you're going to click on all those criteria, and then you're going to run your query. And how you run your query is on the upper right hand part of the screen that has all these list criteria. You're first going to see survey questions, voter status, and suppressions. That's basically going to summarize what you chose. It's always important to check. It's so easy to go in and say, oh, I'm doing this, and then, oh, no, I changed my mind, and I thought I unclicked this, or I didn't, or I thought I clicked this and I didn't. So do try to remember to check whatever is up in the top part of the screen. It's very easy just to forget that and just go straight to preview my results. I always preview my results just to make sure that the result numbers seem to make sense. Now, when you're first doing this, you won't know that much about your precinct, but after a while, you'll get a feel for what numbers make sense and what numbers don't. So you want to click your preview my results. You can also click a plus sign, because if you're doing something like a mailing as opposed to a door knocking, you will see that, okay, my postage bill is going to be much less than I thought, because there's many houses where there's 2 Democrats and I don't need to send out as much postage. So that will give you a little bit of additional information. Sometimes previewing your results are all you need to do. If you're looking at the racial composition of your precinct or the gender breakout, you can just preview your results, just make sure you did it right, and then just write those numbers down on the side. You don't really necessarily always care about getting the list of people that apply. Sometimes just knowing the number of people is good enough, and that's what you can use preview for. Add a step is if you've got criteria that doesn't fit into one nice query. Sometimes you can adjust the query you did, like if you've got too many people. We cannot, make a mailing to this many people. So you can add a step and remove people. But my experience is if you're making too many changes, you just might want to go back and start over. It can be hard to adjust. What you really want to use add a step for is if you're having 2 criteria. For instance, in the last election, we had precincts who wanted to look at 2 groups of people. They wanted to focus on young voters and African-American voters. Well, you can't do that in one single query. So what you have to do is start off with, say, young voters, who will include African-American young voters. If you're just picking all young voters, that's fine. And then when you add a step, you want to say, and I also want to add in African-American voters, and any African-American voter who wasn't in your previous list will be added. So that's a way to make look at 2 different groups in one query. And finally, when you finally get to this point, you can finally run the search. And when you do that, it takes you to the My List page. And the first thing you want to do when you get to the My List page is, again, save. You have a choice of saving a list, which is you are literally just saving the list you just made. It won't ever change. For instance, I always save my list for new Democratic voters as a list, because I'm never going to rerun that query exactly as it is, because it has specific dates associated with it. So I just save that as a list. You can also save it as a query, which means something that you might want to rerun. So if you're reaching out to a particular set of voters during early voting, you may want to rerun your query to remove people who have early voted since the last time you ran it. So that is a case where you might want to save of the list as a search so you can rerun it over and over again in a short period of time. When you do that, you need to fill in a folder name, a list name, and a description. Let me just save you some time. Make it descriptive. I always, when I make my list, I put the year it's run. I put whether it's a primary or general election, or if it's something special else. And for the list name, I often put some major criteria like 2020 general election, young voters. But in the description, I will go into great detail. I will list everything I clicked on there, so that when if I go back and I want to reuse this, or if I want to go back and find that list, but I'm not really sure what did I do, I have that there. It's, if you build a bunch of lists, this will become very helpful. So make it useful to yourself. The list you create, the last list you create will always be the list that shows up in My List when you go to that page. If you want to go to an old list, you have to go to the main screen and then pick My Folders and find the list that you want to use. And that's why you want to name it something that makes sense, that you'll recognize it's what you want to do. So once you've saved the list, you'll have a whole bunch of boxes here. You'll see. Again, we're not going to go over every one of those, but we're going to go over the few that I think will be most useful to you. So the first one is print. And first of all, you're not actually going to be printing the file. You're going to be creating a PDF that you will download, and then you can either print it or you can just distribute it electronically to people in your precinct. You have to select a report format. You can't preview the report formats until after you've selected it. So you just have to pick one that looks like a name that maybe fits. Most of these reports were made, formats were made back in the day when we were doing more paper. And so there's a lot of boxes to fill out. And usually it doesn't really matter, but you might want some, depending on what you're doing, you might want something a little simpler. So you go in, find something, and then preview it. And if it's not what you thought, you just go back and pick another report until it's what you think is.
One side note that is more of my specialty, I have created a few PDF or report formats that are a little more streamlined. And so if there's one that is, if they don't always appear, I think they appear if your search size is a certain amount. So if you have 1,000 people on your list, it's not going to show up. But if you have maybe 500 people on or less on your list, it will show up. So if you have a smaller list and you want a very specific thing like mailing addresses, phone numbers, and emails, if applicable, let me know and I'll see what I can do to create a report that fits that need. And I will name it, just like Ginny had suggested, a very bland but very descriptive name of what year you requested it, and then probably something like contact information or something like that for your specific canvassing. Anyway.
And my experience has been, usually I'm looking for something simpler than what's out there, more basic information that I don't need, like, 5 lines per person. So yeah, that would be very helpful. Okay, back to, you will have to indicate how the person's going to be contacted. And I just listed these, not so much because I need to go over them, but just to give you an idea of some of your options of what might you want to be doing. Letter writing or postcard writing. Maybe you're just doing a lit drop, phone calls, relational canvases, just really talking more to people you already know, or a walking canvas. So that just gives you some of the many action options that you might be wanting to do with this list. Once again, Oh, can we emphasize it enough? Add a descriptive title so you know when you come back what to do. You can sort the list, which if you're, for instance, doing a mailing, you don't need to sort the list. But if you're doing a lit drop or a door knocking, you'd want to sort the list by street name and street number. So you don't have to sort, but you might choose to. When you finally pick out all the criteria, you can go to next on the bottom right, and that will create your PDF. You'll go then to your main menu and you look for My PDFs, which is again why you want to name it something you can find. And then, so you will find the PDF you created, the one that you want to print. Click on the download button on that line. Now, silly me, when I first did this, I thought, oh, that means my PDF's downloaded. But no, you actually are taken to another screen, and there's a little tiny download button on the top right of the screen that you actually have to click on again to actually get to the download. It will download a PDF to your PC that you can save, or whatever you're on. You can save, and again, you can print it, or sometimes one of the things we did in our precinct was distribute a list of infrequent voters to some of our more active volunteers in the precinct, just to see, do you know any of these people? Can you tell us, like the one person was a college student, so that's why he wasn't voting here. Do you know these people? Can you reach out to these people? So that's one reason why you might want to distribute a list like that.
Oh, one more thing in how contacted, I noticed that sometimes if you're running it at the same time you're doing a phone banking or whatever, sometimes the list, if you put how contacted and you put phone call, then it will only show the people you've called. Whereas if you put no actual contact, then it will show all the people that are on the list and you haven't contacted them yet. So that's something to keep in mind.
All right, we are getting towards the end here. Your stamina is waning, we're almost there. You can also print labels for if you're going to do the letters or postcards. If you're going to do that, before you go out and buy your labels, be aware that Votebuilder has some standard labels that they use. It's 5160, 5263, and 5264. Your life will be much easier if you buy one of these and use that, because otherwise it won't print properly.
And those numbers are a little bit of a misnomer. They are the Avery brand, and basically the most common ones we use are the 3 across and 10 down, and those, some of the numbers are the same, but they come in boxes of 100 or 10 pages, and so sometimes those the prefix numbers are different, but the last 2 numbers are the same, and so those labels will still work, even though there's more pages to a box, so they change their numbers for some reason.
I didn't know that. I thought it was the same for any quantity. So see, I told you, you're always learning stuff. So finally, so just if you want to do that, just like with the print, it creates a PDF, and then you can print it just following the instructions I just went over. You can export some files. If you're going to do the thing I told you earlier about finding email addresses, you will have to do an export using the email blob. Or you might, I actually have never done this, but you might for some reason want to export the data that you've pulled into Excel. Just be aware, if you export, Nicole will have to approve it. Nicole always amazes me at how quickly she approves my stuff, but she does, remember, have a little one at home. So
yes, the easiest way to make sure that I see it is also just send me an email And then that way I can get to it, because there is an expiration date. Like I have to get to it, I think within 24 hours. So to make sure I do see it, please email me also when you export. I find that Excel sheets are somewhat useful if you want to, there are times when you do want an Excel sheet that maybe it has the criteria you want better than the PDFs do. And if you know Excel, you can use your Excel savvy to make it look right or do sortings or things like that. I know there's some Excel wizards out there. So sometimes that's why you want an Excel sheet over a PDF.
And the last thing is maps. And this is something we'll get into a lot more when we talk about doing door knocking. But even when you're not doing that, if you just pull everyone in your precinct and just look at the map, you will see where they're physically located. Sometimes that can be very informative. You can also like pull young voters and map that out and see, okay, maybe they're in particular subdivisions. There's all kinds of, you might want to just map out because it's sometimes visually, it's more useful way to think about it. We will be doing some additional training. You may feel like, my God, isn't this enough? Haven't we gone over everything we can do? But no, we haven't. We probably sometime this summer will do a training on how to build a virtual phone bank. And then I don't know, eventually we will do one on how to create a walking canvas, but before we do that, I think we're going to make sure we're in a place where we can do canvassing, door knocking, and it maybe just would be better to wait till it's closer to an election. So we'll see about that one.
Dave has a question quickly.
Go ahead.
You're muted right now.
Oh,
Thank you. So a couple of questions. I noticed I've just been playing around with it a little bit. And even when I create a new search, some of the criteria fields are already, I guess I'd say they're highlighted. There's a box around that one. And that seems to be.
you need to get, if you're going to create a new search, at least this is, I think the safest way to do it is get completely out and then come back in and create a search. If you start a search over after you've created one, you're going to have leftover information from the previous search.
Even if you hit create a list?
Yes.
Well, so you're saying you have to log out and then log back in?
But just get out of the create a list screen.
Okay. So my primary question has to do with contact information. I'm not seeing ways to enter that people are Twitter, what their Twitter account is, what their Instagram account is, what their Facebook account is, because there aren't very many young people who like to be called on the phone. They are contacted in other means. What about those other contact types?
So mostly what you're going to get is emails, which are few and far between, and mostly we get them ourselves through sign-in sheets that we do at events. And you're going to get phone numbers. And phone numbers are either going to be marked as likely sell or likely not sell.
Right.
We don't have any information on their social media at all because of the way that Votebuilder gets its information. It gets its information two different ways. And one is they have outside sources that do import contact information, mostly phone numbers, mailing addresses, and emails. And then also they get it from Board of Elections when people register to vote, which will have phone numbers, and they will also have voter addresses. And voter addresses and mailing addresses are not the same thing, because some people use PO boxes for mailing addresses,
Right.
among other instances, and so forth. But yeah, that's the scope of our information.
But Nicole, if there's far more to it, because we've added all these other fields about our interest as Democrats. So I kind of don't, I think that's
So
that's
some of the
about.
information that we are able to do that's more in depth is people get tagged as delegates, or people get tagged as they went to a Democratic event, if they've signed up for an event or training. And these get inputted into Votebuilder. Another thing is they're starting to use Mobilize and integrate that with Votebuilder, and Mobilize is somewhat integrated into Facebook. So in that way, there is some social media things, and that will keep track of volunteers and how often people do volunteer for events or attend events. And so those sort of things will improve our data, but they're at the ground floor of their integration. They're still relatively new.
Okay.
Which is kind of
So one quick last question. Sorry. When are the gender choices going to expand? That's not the way gender is being used today.
right. That is based on voter IDs, or not voter IDs, but voter registration. If our driver's licenses are updating their gender choices, if our voter registrations are updating their gender choices, then our information will be updated as well. But if those are not updated yet, then we don't have a chance to update our information.
And
Okay.
what you have to understand is this is a national democratic database. Nicole and I have zero control.
But that doesn't mean we can't change things.
Yeah, I'm saying at our level, we do not have control over any of that.
Right. Okay.
Doesn't mean it can't be put forward, but at our county level, we cannot, for instance, add any of those fields.
Okay. Thank you.
Because this is not a busy election period, but if you take this training and then don't do anything with it, you probably won't remember anything. So I recommend, here are some things for especially the new people to Votebuilder to do, just to see, make sure both that you can do it, and also to learn more about your precinct. How many infrequent voters do you have? Young voters, older voters? What's the gender and racial breakout of your precinct? How many Democratic leaning unaffiliated people are in your precinct? How many unaffiliated who are persuadable are in your precinct? Once you get that data, it's really just the start. Once you know what your precinct makeup is, that's the time to get with your executive committee, your get out the vote person, just your general precinct people, and start brainstorming. So now that I know who's in our precinct, what's the best way to reach out to these particular people? How can I think of something that's a little more innovative, a little different, rather than just a complete scatter shot going out and canvassing? So do we have any more questions?
I also want to add that since this past Tuesday, Helen had a training with precinct leaders about grassroots organizing. You guys, as the Votebuilder gurus of your precincts, once you've done the homework that Ginny has suggested, then you can reach out to your precinct chairs and brainstorm ideas. Some of the great ideas that have happened in the past are, we kind of did what was called a short stop. We kind of held like a picnic, or not a picnic, but we had cold drinks on a hot day with some people playing Frisbee in the front yard. And we had some music and a sign out saying we're Democrats, and people would drive by and ask us information about what's going on, how to sign up, how to volunteer. We did that in Fort Totten, and then Fort Totten later got organized, and so forth. So think of ways that you can reach out to your community by reaching out to your precinct chairs with your newfound information.
So any other questions? All right. Again, I know there's a lot of information to consume in a short amount of time. Again, feel free to reach out to either Nicole or me if you are having troubles doing anything, or if you just need some ideas of what to do. I think that's it.
Thank you.
And don't forget to email me if you, I know I have several names down of people who want the recorded copy of this presentation. And email me at info@cravendemocrats.org if you do want a copy of this presentation.
Thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
anything from Nicole?
Yep.